Okay, so today we turn our attention to Congress, the venerable, maddening, exasperating, fascinating, most powerful institution in the world. Beautiful building up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Hope many of you have seen it, or will have a chance in the past. It's important that we realize early on that Congress, although we've spoke at length, you and I, about the controlling of the three branches and the framers making sure that each branch could not reel out of control to abuse the people. Please don't think that the framers thought that all three should be anywhere near equal in power. They believed that this was the baby, this was the main focus. Remember, we couldn't have a direct democracy because of the amount of people that we had in our country, so we needed to have a republic, i.e., a representative body that makes the laws. So Congress, the legislative branch, was to be by far the most important of the three branches. Now, in terms of sheer raw power, the power of Congress, of course, has grown thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times over. It has gotten bigger, more powerful, more far-reaching, more influential, and yet, overall, in the last 235 years, it has lost proportion to the other branches. The President and the Supreme Court have actually gained power proportionately to the legislative branch, which we'll be talking about in this, and certainly we get to the President as well, why that's been allowed to happen. But if you look at 1787, I mean, these aren't empirical by any measure, and I'm sure we could get into unbelievable arguments with historians, but basically 80%, let's say, of power was held in 1787. We created the Constitution with the Congress, 15 with the President, and 5 with the Supreme Court. Perhaps in 2000, that has the same exact numbers, doesn't it? I need to change it. I was thinking perhaps Congress maybe 60, President 35, Supreme Court 15 in 2000, and who knows today what that might be. But I believe probably Congress still might be tied with the President. It's kind of close, kind of tough, but certainly the vision that the framers had that Congress would be the by far the most important part and powerful of the three is long gone. Now, when we look at our bicameral system, we have to think just for a second about why we have two. Most countries in the world are of a unicameral. Out of the 190 countries in the UN, a good many more than 100 of them are unicameral, 125 of them or so. And they only have one. And if you think about it, it makes sense in a way, just in a pure intellectual way. I mean, if you have a lawmaking body, why would you need it to be split into two necessarily, just to make the laws of the land? And of course, we have two, called bicameral instead of unicameral. So we certainly want to enter why we have two and others have but one. And like most things that we've already talked about all year, that goes back to either the fear of central authority, the fear of central man, and our states' rights tradition. Here we do have a combination probably of both, but the fear of central authority being the overwhelming one. Certainly some states' rights identity thrown in there as well as a collateral side concern. But fear of central authority is the salient reason for this. Well, what could we be talking about fear of central authority? We are ourselves, and in 1787, what was the deal? Were we afraid of ourselves in some sort of weird, more modern psychosis in which we can't live with ourselves? Well, what are we talking about? So, the fear of assertive authority is, in fact, us. And in what embodiment could I possibly be speaking? Well, what occurred, and probably I think with good reason, where these small states feared the large states after they signed the Constitution, or before they signed the Constitution, while they signed the Constitution, forever after they signed the Constitution, even today. The small states, like Delaware and Rhode Island, feared that the large states like Virginia and New York might gang up on them in the legislature and actually become the central authority that they were afraid of, and abuse them and take advantage of them and take things away from them and treat them badly. And despite the assurances of the enlightened men with the funny wigs at the Constitutional Convention, they could be convinced of no other, and insisted on constitutional guarantees that of their protection and their representation in the legislative body, or they would not sign on the line which is dotted, and therefore the Constitution would not be brokered. And he insisted that they be represented in some way greater than simply on a matter of population. And because of that reason, we've done exactly that in the famous Connecticut Compromise. I believe we saw that earlier in the year. The Connecticut Compromise was a compromise between the New Jersey plan that favored the large states, the New Jersey plan that favored the small states, and the Virginia plan which favored the large states, and brokered a deal by Connecticut, which was a middle-sized state, called the Connecticut Compromise. And in the Connecticut Compromise, we get our bicameral system, breaking up our legislature into two legislative bodies, the Senate and the House, each representing an advantageous relationship or set up to large states or small. Connecticut Compromise, sometimes called the Great Compromise. So if we look at that, the original construct, you see that the lower house is sometimes what the House of Representatives is referred to, and they are the ones that represent or not represent, but enjoy the advantage to the large states. It's based on population. So very simply, the bigger the state, the more people that you have in the House of Representatives for the United States of America, and figuring that your state, at least in sometimes, not always, obviously not always, but sometimes your state will act together for regional advantages and common ideas and programs and initiatives that you're trying to get through your state. If you act together, then obviously your state's going to have more power if you have 50 people in it than if you have one. And I think that most of us can see that's probably the case, even though they do not act together all the time by any stretch of the imagination. When we look at Texas with its 36 representatives, we'll see that rarely do they act all together on things. It's rife with the same politics, and the fighting between liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans is national politics. But there are still times, of course, in which they do have enough serious state policy or issues before them that will get them to act together and make Texas a very, very, very strong player in the House of Representatives, because we have 36 people in it. California, of course, has the most, and we'll be looking at a map here in just a second. They're elected for 2-year terms. We know we have no term limits, which is why we have some dinosaurs up there that keep getting elected over and 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 over. Some of them up to 27, 28 times now they've been elected to these 2-year terms. 2 years, not very long. And the representation is based on population, so this obviously favors the large states again. The more population you have in your state, the bigger your contingent's going to be in Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives, the more power you're going to have, at least on paper. So this is the 108th Congress. It was slightly, this is the one that was reapportioned after the 2010 census when they redo the states, but still this one's very, very close and gives you an idea of what we're talking about here, with some states having a lot and some states having none. As you can see, of course, California has 53. I believe they have 56 now. It's the largest one, has been for a while. 40 million people live in California, so they have 53 people, and that is a pretty divergent. You can imagine, you take a picture, a photograph of the California contingent in the House of Representatives, and you've got a cross-section of America in that photograph, and it's quite interesting. Texas is the second largest state. We now have 34 people in the House of Representatives. We gained 2 from the last elections, the last shift of population when we took the census in 2010. So 32 of us, and we'll be looking more at those contingent again. They're more Republicans than Democrats at the moment. Ever since the Civil War until recently, that was the opposite. There were always more Democrats than Republicans, but recently more Republicans than Democrats. But it's a fractured House, and when I say fractured, I mean that there's There's still a lot of Dems and a lot of fighting goes on down there. It can get pretty contentious as we look at Texas politics. So they rarely act together, both at the state level and in D.C., but sometimes, of course, they do. Florida, New York is the third biggest with 29. I believe Florida is next at 25. And then you have these different ones that come in around in the small 20s, high teens. And as you'll see, the smallest that you can have is one lonely representative in the House of Representatives for your state. So in an odd situation, if there's only one person that lived in a state, say Wyoming, that would have to be you'd have to be the representatives of the House of Representatives. It'd be you, because you'd be the only one. Because if you only have one person, you get one person. As we'll see here in just a minute, basically in states that have higher populations, you get one per 650,000 people. But if you have a state that only has, like Wyoming, 80,000 people in it, you have one representative for 187,000 people in the House of Representatives. So this all adds up, all these together, to 435 in the House of Representatives. So 435 of them. We started with 70 of them in 1787 with the first Congress, as we added states and population and districts. That went up and up and up and up until we finally got to 435 people in the House of Representatives. Each of them represents a single-member district. So there are 435 districts. Each one has its own entity in that it elects its own guy. It has no outside influence of any sort from any other election committees or people who might get pluralities of votes or people who need a runoffs and this, that, or the other thing. It's simply mano a mano, single member district, one vote. Whoever gets the most represents that district, and it is an autonomous district after that, answerable to no one in terms of electability. Single member districts. Oh, by the way, the 435. How many of you guys out there think they can go up? You don't think I can see you, but I can. So raise your hand if you think that the 435 can go up. Raise them up. Yes, I would say, knowing from experience, if there's 22 people in this class right now watching this, and everybody's participating, 20 of you have your hands up saying that the number cannot go up. Am I right? Well, how many of you think it can go down? Or excuse me, it can't go up. The opposite. How many of you don't think it can go up? Probably a few of you have your hands up right now. So can it go up from 435 as it has, or can it not? So that's my question today, my friends. The answer is no, 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 and yet yes, 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 yes. Huh. Yes, we seem to be into a little bit of an intellectual quandary here, don't we? A mess. Because no, it can't go up, and yes, it can. What could we possibly mean by that? Well, the no part. Legally, in 1927, in a rare move, I think, by the people in the House of Representatives, they got together and they looked at the people that they had by that amount of time, 435 of them, and they basically looked at each other and said, hey, we're running out of desks. What are we going to do here? You know what, this looks like it might be enough people to run this part of the central authority of the United States of America, 435. It just seems like there's enough of us. And they agreed with each other. And they passed a law in 1927 capping it at 435, and it has not yet risen since that very day. So no, answer is this. Legally, it's been capped. Well, where does the yes come from? Well, the Constitution still allows it. They could pass a law tomorrow, raising it to 1,200 if they wanted to. In fact, if we had allowed the growth of Congress as it had been going from its inception to 1927, when they capped it at 435, today we would have about 900 people in Congress, and we could lift that law and go to 900 people in Congress. And at that time, I'd have to move from the country and leave it to you, but we could do that. So yes, it is legally possible to change that 435, and no, it is not legally, because we've capped it in 1927. Back with you in a few minutes for part 2.